All right, ready to go? Okay, thank you. Well, I appreciate everybody. Thanks for the little pause. Wait for the pause. Thanks for coming after lunch. We have a presentation about the importance of data. My name's Ed Haslam. I'm the CMO of Conviva. If you're not familiar with Conviva, Conviva has architected a fundamentally new way of measuring and doing analytics for streaming video, or what we like to say is sort of the next generation of TV. But why are we all here today? We're here today because of this, right? This symbol, right? And if you're familiar, hopefully you all know this symbol, but Ericsson did a study of this symbol. They actually put biometric probes on people, showed them horror films, showed them surprising things, showed them this. And this actually raised the heart rate more than a horror film did. All right, so it's actually a real issue for our health and happiness, right? And it's really only going to get worse as the content resolutions go up and the different types of content. And you look at things like online gaming and esports, and in the future more 3D and VR-like content. The ability for the internet to naturally deliver really high-quality entertainment content or video content is always going to be stretched and strained, because we, as consumers, are always trying to consume it in new and interesting ways, right? So this presentation is all about how do we help address this. And if you look at Conviva, Conviva basically looks and says the only way to really understand whether consumers are having a good experience is to measure the experience in the glass, right? Or within the screen that the consumer is viewing. And that's fundamentally what Conviva does. It puts a little piece of software in every screen that our publishers distribute video to, and then we bring it back to a network operations center if, in fact, people are having some sort of buffering event or low video start time or poor bit rate, which are the three primary QoE metrics. The network operations center for the publisher or the pay TV operator is able to see that happen in real time. And that's the other really important aspect of this, is you have to be in the screen, measuring in screen, and two is it has to happen within seconds. Because if you process this and understand that there was buffering a half hour after there was buffering, then your audience is gone, right? They've already left. Their heart rate already went up and they chose to watch a horror film instead, right? So, if you look at it specifically around the QoE data that we're talking about here, and John Alexander's, if you were in John Alexander's presentation from level 3, he talked a lot about device proliferation and how many different devices there are out there that consumers are watching video on. So you can't just do web, you can't just do iOS, you can't just do Android. You have to do all these very, very different devices that we're using to watch video, smart TVs, different next generation tablets. He actually had a whole category called other. Right? And in fact, Conviva, you'll see later, we measured video on 2,100 different consumer client devices. 2,100 different builds of operating system application. So you have to have a probe custom built for over 2,100 devices. Right? And that's the only way you can really measure in screen. And what are we measuring? We're measuring QoE data, like I said, bit rate, buffering, or what we call rebuffering ratio, the percentage of time the consumer sits in buffering versus sits watching content. And then also bit rate, what's the resolution of the video coming through, along with about 30 or 40 other QoE metrics, because there's things like seek-induced rebuffering and network-induced rebuffering. It gets very esoteric and arcane, but then equally important is we're measuring engagement data, right? So how long did the consumer watch? What were they watching? And then you can do big data correlation where you can correlate quality of experience to engagement, right? And that's the key aspect of this that you have to understand, is that really in the end, what publishers care about, what HBO or Netflix or CBS or NBC or Sky in the UK care about is how long did you watch? Are you watching more? Are you telling more people to watch? Are you referring our content? And QoE is a good forward indicator of engagement, because if that buffering symbol comes up, you might watch less. And that's what we call an experience strategy. So most publishers out there today in the world of data, they do a lot around content strategy, content acquisition, original content programming, and they think if I just create great content, people will come. Well, the reality is underneath the waterline, there's this whole thing called experience, right? Which is, will people really watch if they see a buffering symbol, if it takes 10 seconds for the video to start on your Android device, if the bit rate on your Roku and your high-definition TV suddenly downgrades for you, will you change the channel even though it's Game of Thrones or Westworld or one of these other compelling original content series? Well, what we've seen is that people do change the channel. And in fact, it looks like this. This is a PC mangling the numbers, but this is actually from Conviva data. So Conviva measures around 80 to 90 of the world's largest OTT publishers. Some of the ones I mentioned earlier, people like HBO and Sky and CBS, NBC. And this is from 2011 to 2015. And what you see here is a 1% change in rebuffering. So if it rebuffers for 1% more, engagement drops in each of these years by this number of minutes, right? And the interesting thing here is we as consumers are becoming less and less tolerant of quality issues. We're expecting the internet to get better, and if it doesn't, we're changing the channel and watching other content, right? Which is there, you see up to 16 minutes less engagement if rebuffering changes by 1%. This is what I mean by this correlation and doing big data to correlate these experience metrics to engagement data. Right? And this is the whole point of this presentation is data. So just from in terms of a Conviva, little promotion here, 8 billion plus streaming hours of video measured each year, over 2.5 billion devices, coverage in 180 countries, processing around 3 million events per second from all these sensors, these 2.5 billion sensors, across all CDNs, global ISPs, and as I said before, 2,100 different types of video apps. What you'll see sometimes is people will say, oh, I can measure your web content, or I can measure your iOS and Android. That doesn't work because, as you saw in John's presentation, some of these platforms like Roku are getting increasingly popular, or PlayStation in certain demographics. And it's also very dependent on your demographic that you're trying to reach in terms of what they want to watch on. Then finally, if you look at the data, so this is very interesting. This is what we've seen over the last 6 years in our top 40 publishers. So if you look here and you see starting out in 2010 to 2016, up until about 2014, maybe 15, it was pretty flat, maybe 3, 4, 5%. And this is OTT viewing hours. This is the number of streaming hours watched across each of these publishers. You'll see spikes around things like the World Cup, right out there. But then if you look into the past 12 to 18 months, OTT traffic is doubling in our publisher base year on year, right? And if you look at current industry trends of pay TV subscribers in the US, dropping 750,000 subscribers this past quarter, which is the largest single decline. And if you look at some of the ad revenues looking like they're softening a little bit in traditional linear TV, it's not that the audiences are not watching anymore, it's they're watching on all kinds of different devices and over the top now. The audience is just shifting. Right? And this is a huge dramatic hockey stick we've seen. So what are we here to talk about? So we have this initiative, we call it the QoE Multiscreen Analytics Initiative. So Conviva is capturing all of these analytics and data. We're processing it in real time, mainly making it available to publishers in their NOCs or to pay TV operators. But what we've seen is there's a lot of different constituents in the video delivery chain that could potentially benefit from this consumer data, right? So CDNs have lots of data and instrumentation within their networks, encoding providers at the encoding server, in ingest and egress and ingress. But very few people have the data that, for a little self-promotion that Conviva has because of all the work we've done in collecting it in the consumer device. So how can that data be applied to all those other constituents in the ecosystem so that the internet basically gets better for streaming? Because really, in the end, all you care of is the quality of experience to the consumer better, and are they watching more? It doesn't matter if your router is dropping bits if it's not impacting the consumer experience. You want to only fix the things, there's so many things to fix the things that affect your consumers, right? So how do we do this? So this is just sort of a little thing, so look here, streaming event happening in these client devices. It's a streaming interruption. You'll see a little x-axis here down at the bottom. Data brought to the platform, we provide it back to the publisher in this dashboard. They look and if it's an issue, they have to do root cause analysis. Why is this rebuffering happening? Is it a client issue? Is it a CDN issue? Is it an encoding issue? What's the source of the problem? There's so many different things that can go wrong. So today, what do? They start calling all the constituents. They start saying, hey, it looks like maybe Adobe in your primetime framework, there might be an issue on Android. They might call Akamai and say, looks like your CDN's not working well. They might call their encoding provider or the OVP, and they have to go through this whole process before they can resolve it. And that takes a lot of time today, right? So with the ecosystem initiative, all we're doing basically is short-circuiting that same process. So the same thing's happening, but now we're making the data immediately available to each constituent. Right? So in this case, and we'll talk level later, like level 3 is a partner in this initiative. Level 3 has the same dashboard that all of their customers have with Conviva. So level 3 will see the exact same data that their publishers see at the exact same time. So they can potentially do analysis and fixing even before the publisher might hear about it or might see it themselves, right? And that's what we call these ecosystem benefits. So a shared view of consumer experience for everyone in the terms of these metrics and their impact on engagements, removes the burden from the publisher who's there really just trying to make sure there's great quality of content, that they're responding to people, making good content recommendations. Publishers aren't necessarily network infrastructure providers. They often outsource this to third parties. Shortens the time to resolution for any experience problems that might happen. And in the end, hopefully, makes the internet just a better place for streaming. So if you look at this, today we work with InniaQuest. InniaQuest is one of our ecosystem providers and sort of the network monitoring or network pro point of view. So InniaQuest might throw alarms on various devices inside the network, but they need to correlate that to, is it really impacting consumer experience? And so they're marrying our data with their data, and we have a proof of concept of a single dashboard that an InniaQuest and a Conviva customer can use together, so they can have the same view again. Then you look in the DRM and player framework space, right? So we have partnerships with Adobe and Haslam, where they're also doing this, right? So they can actually see potentially, maybe it's the latest build of a Haslam player. Maybe it is a DRM authentication issue that they can see in their dashboard. And again, they can correlate that back to, again, what it matters, which is consumer experience in the device. And then finally, in the sort of CDN and OVP space, we have two partnerships. One is with Level 3 that I mentioned before, and also with VDMS. So again, joint customers, like in the case of VDMS, Fox is a customer of ours and a customer of VDMS. They can have a same view of any issues on any Fox property that Fox is seeing at the same time as with us. So in the end, what this does is it removes the burden from the publisher, reduces the time to solve the problem, and hopefully just makes watching video on the internet a little bit better. So our heart rates don't go up as much when we see the rebuffering signal. So in the end, we think the way to do this, this is an eye chart, but it's really measure the experience in the consumer experience there on the left, in the global audience and the variety of different devices, process it in real time, look for correlations of correlating experience to engagement, and then provide it out through a various set of APIs, dashboards, and partnerships in the ecosystem so that everyone can collaborate to make it a better experience for us. Thanks. I don't know if I have time for questions. Are there any questions? Yeah.
On your unified dashboard, how do you ingest from third parties? Like, do you have a standard mechanism?
Just API to API. So sometimes with Grafana, we've got a standard plugin with them. And then often it's customer driven. They might say, for example, hey, we love Fastly's dashboard. Can you just get your data into their dashboard? And some might say, we love Conviva's dashboard. Can you get some Fastly data into that dashboard? So we do it case by case. Other questions? Great. Thank you so much.